When you hear the Father in today's gospel parable say, "This brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found," does it bring anything to mind? He was lost and has been found. I'm taken straight to the line from Amazing Grace, "I once was lost, but now am found." This is no accident, it turns out. But the connections between Amazing Grace and the parable of the prodigal son go far deeper than a direct reference. It is estimated that Amazing Grace is performed something like 10 million times a year, and over 1,000 recordings of it are on the internet. I am particularly fond of the Scottish bagpipe versions. The author, John Newton, wrote a transcendent ode to the very forgiveness highlighted in Jesus' parable today. He needed that forgiveness. If we all had some rough edges in our youth, his were rougher than most. He went to sea with his father, but wound up impressed into the Royal Navy. At one point, he deserted the Navy to go visit his girlfriend, Polly. He was whipped and eventually traded to a slaving ship where he was known as a particularly profane and disagreeable man, even by slave trader standards. Along the way, he very consciously and publicly turned his back on God. His captain eventually sold him to slavers in West Africa, but family arranged for his return to England. During the return, the ship encountered a severe storm off the coast of Ireland. Newton saw one of his fellow crew members swept overboard. At some point, he found himself exclaiming, "Lord, have mercy upon us." Later, when he got home, he started to wonder why he had asked for God's mercy and whether he was worthy of that mercy or even redeemable. The story would have been very tidy if he had then turned his life around and immediately dedicated himself to Christ and had begun living a life worthy of redemption. Unfortunately, as with so many people, the urge and the action did not align. While he started improving his life for the sake of Polly, whom he wished to marry, he stayed in the slave trade for another 7 years. But slowly the tide of his life turned. Polly did agree to marry him, and he eventually got out of the slave trade. He settled on land and then had time to pursue his spiritual questions. For 7 years, he applied for ordination and finally was deemed ready. He was assigned curate in Olney, Buckinghamshire, where he was eventually known for the tenderness of his pastoral care as much as for his faith and eventually famous hymns. Foul-mouthed sailor to slaver to slave to slaver again. When Newton talks about how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me, it's not just poetic license. Some people have tried to temper the fiery majesty of Amazing Grace. You can find versions that replace "saved a wretch like me" with "saved a soul like me," or "saved and strengthened me." John Newton knew what he was talking about. We are all wretches. We are all the prodigal sons and daughters. We have all wandered at times far out into the land where we have felt far from the warmth of God's love. It was still there. We could see it. We'd see its effect on others, but we had turned away from it. I don't know about everyone here, but I know that when I look back on my life, I sometimes feel paralyzed by embarrassment and regret at mistakes I've made in my dealings with others. I've never done anything horrible, nothing that would get me locked up or banished from polite company, But I've got specific examples of where I've acted selfishly or foolishly, cowardly, or thoughtlessly. I like to think that I've learned from my mistakes, and thus the really significant blunders have grown fewer as I've grown older. But can I say that I won't make a terrible decision tomorrow or next week or next year? Of course not, and it would be pure vanity to claim otherwise. God understands this. He understands us. His Son paid for our sin, and now wants us to step into the light of God's love and away from sin. But we are the prodigal sons and daughters, and we sometimes feel like we eat the same carob pods as the pigs. Family, jobs, health, and community, they can all disappoint us and serve us bitter gruel. Even the little things in life, sports and hobbies and pastimes, can harden and darken in our lives. And of course, we live in a world nowadays where whatever you find enjoyable, there's someone to tell you that it's bad for you or bad for your neighbor or bad for the planet. And sometimes they're right. But I'm sorry, I'm not going to feel bad for being a diehard Minnesota Twins fan. I'm just not. Jesus tells us, the father of the prodigal son tells his oldest, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because the brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. We then hear that echoed and reinforced in Amazing Grace when we sing, "I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see." That's the kind of love we get when we open ourselves to God. This is why we gather together on a morning like this. We are found. We do see. We receive and feel God's love and rededicate ourselves to his word and the path he has shown us. We are not in a cold and foreign land. We are not eating the carob pods. We are warm and safe and loved by the Lord. Is it always easy to be like the father in this parable, full of love and sage wisdom for both of his sons? No. Families can be our greatest strength, but also our greatest challenge. The ties that bind can be the ties that wound or infuriate. So too in the other areas of our lives that we care about. But if we can absorb and reflect the love and forgiveness that God shows us in every minute of every day, we're off to a good start. Amen.